Well, and I guess also, the mindset that you go into playing a co-op game has a big thing to do with it too.
Yeah.
You want to talk between each other and make sure that you don't, screw each other over, so that you can get through it.
Yeah, hopefully you're actually cooperating.
DIY and Tane both mentioned something, and so we're going to kind of put them together. DIY says, you may disagree, and although I know many people criticize this game, it's really fun when you have 2 or more people play it. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles for the GameCube. Monsters get stronger with more players there are, and you have to really rely on each other to win the game. And then Tane says, there's probably a good list of games I could choose, but there's only one game that stands out for me, and that's Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles for the GameCube. It's more expensive to play multiplayer, you use GBAs as controllers, and need the link cords for it to work, but it's one of the few co-ops I've really been able to go back to with friends, and I've spent hundreds of hours playing it through multiple playthroughs. I'm surprised to see so many comments for this game already, but it really does deserve it.
I think what we said earlier was it was a clever idea, not necessarily well executed, but it was still a clever idea.
Yeah, I mean, how many of your friends are going to have a GBA?
And the cable.
And so that, yeah, I can see how it would be nice to not stop the gameplay by going through menus and stuff on the GBA.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just one of those things that isn't feasible with so many different consoles and so many people having so many different consoles, and sometimes only being able to afford one or two consoles.
And none of my friends had that much equipment when it came out. So
yeah, I'd like to play it, but once again, having that restriction, I have a GBA and a
they're
cable.
cheap now.
Well, yeah, they're cheap.
Well, I'm not sure if the cables are still cheap.
I don't know. We'll have to do some research for us.
Mr. Magnificent says, my favorite co-op game without a doubt is Kirby Superstars for the SNES. Another game that I love is Final Fantasy VI. It's my all-time favorite game, hands down, but I mention it second because its co-op feature is less than stunning. Being that all that really happens is you assign certain characters to certain controllers when you enter battles, which is a really cool feature, I think.
But is it really co-op?
Is it really co-op?
I mean, because you're still going through the one story. But I don't know how much of that would be. It has a co-op.
Really cooperative.
Yeah. What does make a good and a bad co-op game?
What makes a co-op game? Maybe is the question.
Is it something that you can split off to at any time and give somebody a controller?
Drop in, drop out.
Yeah.
Which is not common.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, you bring up a good point.
Yeah. Hamster Man says, I can definitely agree on System Shock 2. We have had some great times playing it on LANs before. My only complaint about the co-op mod was the infinite respawn thing. It kind of took the scary away.
Yeah, it definitely took the scary away. But in a way it was really ahead of its time, because it's something that we've been doing a lot of now. Think about Halo. You die in Halo and you wait a few seconds and then you'll respawn near your other players, which can be bad if they're in a firefight. But in System Shock, you would just infinitely respawn back at the beginning of the level. It did take away the scary, but later on, like he says, it was actually a godsend.
Thule says, I remember playing Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, Icewind Dale, with all the expansions with a friend in his house, and we would export the same characters over games. Probably the best gameplay experience I've ever had.
Yeah.
I haven't Icewind Dale, and
I think you played the original Baldur's Gate, hadn't you?
Yeah, I've played Baldur's Gate. I didn't know you could export characters.
Yeah, the characters are sort of separate from the games themselves. So you can build up a character and then export the character and bring it into a new game. So you can bring a level 20 character in that you had worked on before, and it doesn't have to be cheating necessarily.
Well, that's kind of cool, and that also kind of does go along with the role-playing aspect.
Yeah. Actually, it's more of a real role-playing experience than the other Baldur's Gate games that we mentioned.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Triforcell says, Perfect Dark is by far my favorite co-op game and my favorite FPS. My brother and I played through the story mode and co-op mode 3 times in one summer, each time on a higher difficulty. Not only do the missions change as you go up in difficulty, but the missions change for co-op mode so that you're both participating without having one of you stealing the limelight.
Another problem that happens in a lot of co-op games.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but isn't it interesting how fewer people have mentioned that missions go up in difficulty as you get more co-ops, and lately we've had a lot of games that are really starting to do
again
that.
with Borderlands.
It's like they finally found something that worked, and those games not only became memorable, but people started pulling from that for other things. Jaw272 says Doom. I loved Doom. Any of them really, but the classic Dooms mostly. And now with a little tool called Skull Tag, you can play the classic Dooms on Windows XP on up. And it makes finding a net game so easy, anyone can do it.
Excellent. And here, this was the game that was supposed to make us so antisocial and violent.
And I haven't seen anybody else who made comments.
Maybe they were just too busy being antisocial and violent.
Prid says Sven Coop. It's the best N-player Coop game that I've ever played.
It was pretty amazing. It was for Half-Life, which didn't inherently have a cooperative mode. But Sven adds co-op and adds a bunch of weapons and adds a bunch of modes, and when I played it, it was still pretty early beta, so they hadn't quite ironed out the kinks, and we had to very manually go through the maps and choose the next level, and we'd end up with like powerful Uzis, and it was not for everyone, but it was pretty cool.
But it was enjoyable.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, we had a lot more comments that we just didn't get to, but thank you all for commenting, and I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we shall see you next time on Mario's Pipeline. Hi, welcome to the Pipeline. My name...
Are you now?
I am. I am a man!